One more thing. Okay, actually 5. I've got 5 draft targets the Mavericks should either trade up for or they can get at 58. I'll tell you who they are on today's One More Thing.
I'm here because I have to be here.
Dallas is going to get a seat at the table.
That's it. It's me versus the machine. Don't let his whiteness take away from his quickness.
You can rest later. You're young.
I'm never a color here.
Wait. One more thing.
Yeah. Welcome. You're still locked into the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and your best friend covering the Dallas Mavericks, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a bonus or other things daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And today, I got 5 targets. Mavs Draft gave me 5 targets. I went through and I did a little research, and we've got our Mavs, or we got our draft prospect experts on. I've got 1-minute videos from each of them breaking down who they are, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about them, talk about why the Mavs should take them, why they shouldn't take them. And so let's get into it. Let's start with our first one. Bobby Klintman. He is a 6'10", wing, big, kind of like he can play a little bit of a wing here and there. 6'11" wingspan. He's gonna be 21 years old at the time of the draft. He went to school, or he's from Sweden, and he played recently overseas. And so let's hear from Leaf Tulane from Locked On NBA Big Board about him.
Bobby Klintman, who last played for Cairns Taipans in the NBL and previously played for Wake Forest, is an intriguing player as he's 6'10" with a sweet shooting stroke. I'm Leaf Tulane of Locked On NBA Big Board, and Klintman figures to factor into the late first round, early second round discussion as the Swedish big boasts a coveted skill set in the modern NBA. As a player who can be a plus-size wing who shoots it confidently, Klintman averaged 10 points and 5 boards for the Taipans while shooting 81% from the free throw line. I believe he could play the 3 if his foot speed improves a little bit as a lateral mover, as well as playing his more natural position as a stretch 4. I don't know if he can immediately be an impact player for a team with winning aspirations, likely picking in his range, but Klintman can be cultivated into a valuable rotational player as he gets more comfortable with NBA athletes. For more on Bobby Klintman, subscribe to Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, Leaf Tulane there. Bobby Klintman, interesting kind of guy. He's basically, if you're going to look long-term, he could be your long-term Maxi Kleber replacement. A guy that has good shooting form, good shooting motion, 6'10", 6'11" wingspan, bigger guy. He flashed some shot creation skills, switchable defender. Got a lot of my info from obviously the Locked On NBA Big Board guys, but also the Ringer. Great draft guide from them. They always do a great job putting that together. Switchable defender, can use his length and quick hands. He has passing vision that translates in transition and closeout opportunities. He projects as a high floor contributor as long as his shooting numbers translate. Couple of weaknesses for him. He's not the strongest guy. His lateral quickness, like Leaf said, he could struggle defending laterally and defending in space. Like Leaf said, he could play the 3 if he could get a little bit quicker. And then also he's inconsistent as a perimeter scorer. So if you want him to play a 3 or you want him to be like a versatile scoring 4, you may not be getting that guy. But the Ringer's one sentence, they always have these great one sentence descriptors. A versatile 2-way wing with a skill set and frame to potentially thrive in the NBA. And to me, that's what I think he could be. If the Mavs could get him, and he's all over the place in these mocks, it's kind of wild. This draft is one of those where you just go, I don't know what to think about any of these guys because you just go off of some of the experts. For example, the Ringer has him at 18, and you go, oh my gosh, 18. Can the Mavs even get to 18 if they traded or whatever? I don't know. But ESPN has him at 32. That seems a little bit more doable for the Mavericks to get a high second-round pick. The Athletic also has him at 36. And then Mavs Draft, so Richard's just on the show today, had him at 45 on his board, really far down. That isn't really a big, huge fan of him. But this could be a guy that could be available for the Mavericks if they go up and get a second-round pick. And trade up a little bit, guy that could come in and, like I said, long-term replacement for Maxi Kleber. You can see it. You can kind of make out how this could work for the Mavericks. And Bobby Klintman, first one I'm kind of interested in. That's an interesting name for sure. The next one, Jonathan Mobo. He's a 6'7" wing, 7'2" wingspan. Insane, which is what we see some of the top defenders have. These huge wingspans. 22 at the time of the draft, went to San Francisco. The Ringer's one-sentence explainer about him is possesses the size of a forward, the handle of a guard, and the shooting of a throwback center. Let's hear from our guy, Andy Patton, over at the Locked On College Basketball Show about Jonathan Mobo.
San Francisco big man Jonathan Mobo is an extremely high upside big thanks to his versatile skill set. I'm Andy Patton, the host of the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Mobo is a 6'8" big man with a massive 7'2" wingspan who averaged 14.2 points, 10.1 rebounds, and 3.6 assists last year for the Dons after transferring in from Missouri State. Mobo's tenacious rebounding and strong passing ability give him the profile of a strong connective big at the NBA level, and his athleticism and defensive intensity should lead to him performing as a two-way big. If the offense holds up, there's little doubt Mobo can be an impactful player in the NBA with a profile similar to Denver forward Aaron Gordon, although that's the high-end comparison. For more on Jonathan Mobo, WCC hoops, and all things college basketball, check out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, Jonathan Mobo. There you go from Andy Patton, Locked On College Basketball. Interesting kind of player. The 7'2" wingspan immediately steps out and you go, oh, okay. He's got the handle of a guard. He's got the, he can't shoot a little bit, but he didn't take any threes in college at all. So that's definitely or he took 2 threes in college, missed both of them, but he didn't make any threes. He missed 2 threes. 2. I don't know. I don't even know if 2 is a sample size enough to know anything, but he's not taking them. And so that's definitely a weakness. Non-shooter, struggles from the free throw line, hasn't displayed a soft touch from floater range either. So he just doesn't project as a shooter. These guys, this is, the Michael Kidd-Gilchrist type player. I have a real hard time, unless you're with a guy, unless you know what their work ethic is, if you know, all right, I think we can project this guy could add a 3-point shot or something like that. This is a hard sell for me, but this is one of the players that could be in the Mavs range. For example, the Ringer had him at 39. Could be around where the Mavericks could get to. ESPN had him at 41. The Athletic had him at 42. And Mavs Draft had him at 52, so he's a lot lower than some of the other guys. But he could be a guy that's in the Mavs range if they want to get a guy that is an incredible on-ball defender. Highly versatile defender who could thrive in the switch-heavy scheme. Insane rebounder, too. Average 14, he averaged 10 rebounds a game in college. 14, I think, per 36. Just a really great rebound, a great nose for the ball, all that kind of stuff. He's got all these other different skills. It's just that one thing is the shooting, which is why he's not going, in the first round in a draft like this. He's also got kind of an interesting story. The Ringer wrote this on their draft guide too. He left high school without a single Division I offer, then spent a year at Independence Community College in Kansas and went to Northeastern Oklahoma A&M College as well. Then went over to, which school did he play for? He played for Missouri State. And then he played for San Francisco last season. So he's kind of bounced around a little bit, found a spot there in San Francisco, averaged 14 points, 10 boards, 3.5 assists, 1.5 steals. And you're like, okay, you kind of see what type of a player he could be. But to me, the non-shooting is just such a concern. It's just one where you go, I just don't know that the Mavs can do this. If they can take time and develop him, if you develop any kind of a reliable shot, and Derek Jones Jr., the Mavs didn't necessarily develop him, but he was not necessarily known as a shooter and came in and he did an okay job for the Mavericks. I think that it's just so hard to take one of these guys that is a non-shooter. Like literally, the Ringer called him a non-shooter, just like a guy that doesn't shoot the ball at all. Tough one. That's a tough one. But those are 2 names that are a little bit higher up that the Mavs would have to. They'd probably have to trade up for those 2 guys, the Bobby Klintman and the Jonathan Mobo. 2 interesting names, but coming up, let's tell you 3 names that the Mavericks could get at 58, or maybe trade up just a little bit if they needed to do that. I'll tell you who those guys are coming up.
You don't believe you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook has all kinds of props and odds that you can use to get in on the action. Go to FanDuel.com. They have all kinds of things for the draft as well. We talked about Bronny James. They have a whole tab for him, which I think is funny. But they have all kinds of other things for the number 1 pick. Favorite right now is Zachary Richichet, minus 270. So there's not really he's not really like a huge favorite. Donovan Clingan is plus 340. Alexander Sarr plus 600 to go to the Hawks. And then Steven Castle is the next one, plus 5,000. So there's a huge gap between those guys. So if you want to bet on the number 1 pick, you can do that as well. FanDuel.com/lockedon to get in on the action. They have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. If you want to bet on all those picks, they also have top 20. Will Zach Edey go in the top 20? That's minus 950. All kinds of stuff like that. Jared McCain to go in the top 20 is minus 700. So all kinds of fun stuff like that you can get on FanDuel.com/lockedon. Thanks for hanging out with me on Locked On Mavs. It's the One More Thing, the bonus show for Locked On Mavs. When we got too much to talk about in one episode, we give you another one. And that's kind of how this works. So support the show if you want to get more and you want more content and more direct contact with me. text the number below, text the number in the description, and get involved in the subtext. I'll send extra content. I'll send rumors. As soon as they happen, I'll text you the rumor. As soon as I see it, I'll text you the rumor, and I'll give you my thoughts on it and all that. People love that kind of stuff. They love responding back and forth, and we talk about those rumors. So subscribe to the subtext. It also supports the show. Appreciate everybody that's on the subtext. You're the real ones. Okay, talked about Bobby Klintman. Talked about Jonathan Mobo. I messed up his name in the middle of it. If you saw the cut in the middle of the video, I had to edit that out. Another one, Jaylen Bridges, 6'8" wing. Richard talked about this guy on the show earlier today. 6'8" wing, 6'10" wingspan. He's going to be 23 at the time of the draft. Went to Baylor. And let's hear from our guy. Let's hear from our guy from Locked On Baylor.
Jaylen Bridges had his breakout year in the Big 12, and now he's ready to take that show to the NBA. I'm Cam Stewart from Locked On Baylor. And Bridges was one of the best players in the conference, maybe even the country, in the second half of this season when he got his confidence up, averaging 12 points and 6 rebounds a game to his first All-Big 12 team as a member of the Bears. Shot over 40% from 3. That's where I see him making a huge impact. That catch-and-shoot 3 for a 6'9" guy who can guard a couple of different positions. And I think, honestly, he might spend some time in the G League this year, but I could see him on an NBA roster throughout this 2024-2025 season. Think of a role player like a Pat Connaughton from Notre Dame and then the Milwaukee Bucks where he won a championship. Catch and shoot guy off the bench. I think he'd be perfect for that. For more on Bridges and all things Baylor, follow and subscribe to Locked On Baylor on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
There you go. There's Locked On Baylor. Cam Stewart on Jaylen Bridges. I'm fascinated in Jaylen Bridges. This is one that I really do like. I was not so big on Jonathan Mobo. I am big on Jaylen Bridges. I think that this is a great one. The Ringer's one-sentence explainer on him is a quintessential role player who enhances his teammates with 3-and-D skills and flashes a higher upside. This is the type of guy I think you take a flyer on. If you can get him, if you have to trade up maybe a little bit for him, he's a dynamic shooter with clean mechanics who can run off of screens, take threes off the dribble. He shot 40.9% from 3, or 41.2% at Baylor at 5 threes a game, which is awesome for him. He did shoot 32% his junior year and his sophomore year from 3. So that's the one where you're kind of interested in, like, all right, he was kind of an inconsistent shooter until his 1 year. So is that going to translate to the NBA? Will it take longer for it to translate into the NBA? So that's sort of a questionable thing, and maybe a weakness is the inconsistency of it. He has some handling, though. He's displayed shot creation skills and some of his pull-up threes, in and out dribbles on drives, spin moves, things like that. Very competitive defender. Got that long wingspan, 6'10". High IQ player without the ball, too. Huge for the Dallas Mavericks. If you are a player that can play without the ball or is good without the ball, can relocate, knows where to be, all that kind of stuff without the ball, because a lot of times you're not going to have the ball. And probably as a rookie, you're not going to have the ball either. He's just a low usage player that hasn't proven to be a lead creator. That's not a weakness for the Mavericks. That's a weakness that I saw a lot of sites write about him. But if you just come in as a 3-and-D player that can do a little bit of everything here and there, you're not going to be asked to do a whole lot with Luka and Kyrie. And they're not going to ask the guy that they take at 58 or the guy that they take in the second round to come in and do a whole lot. So you want a low usage player that can thrive in other areas. This is a guy that I really like. Now, is he going to be available? That's the thing. Mavs Draft, Richard is super high on him. He has him at 21. That's like quite literally insane compared to everybody else. The Ringer has him at 47, way far down. ESPN mocked him at 53, and The Athletic mocked him at 54. So that's right in the Mavs range. 58, one of the last picks in the draft. Sometimes you get down to like the late 50s, and a player goes, "Don't draft us," because we want to go undrafted. So maybe that works out well for the Mavericks there. They could get this guy maybe he goes undrafted, and the Mavericks can pick him up afterwards anyway. And if they trade 58th pick, or if they take somebody else, or they could get him undrafted. This is a guy that I really like. I'm really interested in. 3-and-D guy, shot the ball well at Baylor, could come in and could help fill some time and grow a little bit. He's 23, but could still grow a little bit into a role. Those 3-and-D guys, they seem to take a little bit longer sometimes. Let's talk about another guy. This is Dylan Jones, 6'6" wing, 6'11" wingspan. He's made 22 at the time of the draft. Went to Weber State. The one-sentence descriptor on him is he's a bully ball point guard with an unorthodox style of play, given his size. This is the guy that we talked about on the show earlier today that body-wise reminds people of Grant Williams. But this is what they have to say about Dylan Jones.
Weber State forward Dylan Jones was one of the most productive players in all of college basketball last season. I'm Andy Patton, the host of the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Jones is a 6'6" forward who exploded as a 20-point per game scorer last year at Weber State, also averaging 9.8 rebounds, 5.2 assists, and 2 steals per game. Jones measured just 6'4" without shoes, but his burly frame and 6'11" wingspan allow him to play bigger, giving him an archetype somewhat reminiscent of longtime NBA veteran Paul Millsap. For more on Dillon Jones and all things college basketball, check out the Locked On College Basketball podcast on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts.
Yeah, there you go. So the Paul Millsap comparison there from our guy Andy Patton, Locked On College Basketball. This is he's a really interesting kind of player. Bruiser guard, like 6'6", 240 basically. He's got good passing ability, decisive off the bounce, finding cutters, spot up shooters with speedy bullseye passes. He can post up. He's a great rebounder, almost 10 rebounds per game, which is insane for a player like that size and for playing his position. He does not shoot the ball super well, 32% from 3, but he did shoot 80% from the free throw line. That seems to be an interesting indicator for some. Looks uncomfortable as a shooter from deep ranges though. So you're like, all right, we got to work on that a little bit, even though he is shooting 32%, which is not awful. Sluggish on-ball defender who needs to improve his lateral quickness. So he's not breaking anybody down and stopping anybody. But to me, this would be an interesting one if the Mavs want to take a flyer on a guy that's just an unorthodox type player. Sometimes these guys work. The Grant Williamses of the world worked in the NBA. Even like a Jalen Brunson, where you go, I just don't know how this guy would work in the NBA, and then all of a sudden it does. If you get Dillon Jones, I think you take him and you play him in Frisco, and I would love to go watch him play a couple games for the Legends and just see how that works out for him. Mavs Draft had him at 40. The Ringer had him at 59, which doesn't exist because there's only 58 picks in the draft. ESPN mocked him at 50, and then The Athletic didn't have him drafted at all. So this is another guy that you get down to those late picks. He decides, hey, I don't want to be drafted. I'd rather just pick where I want to go, and then it could be available. So this is one that I'm interested in, but I don't think he would help the Mavericks right away, or even maybe a year or two. I think it would take a while to figure out, all right, does his style of play, does the bully ball, unorthodox style of play, does that work in the NBA? And if it does, cool. That'd be fun. I mean, it'd be fun to have a guy like that. But you have to see if it does. See it in Frisco. Last guy, Tristan Newton, 6'4", guard, about 190 pounds, 6'7", wingspan, 23 at the time of the draft, went to UConn. The Ringer's one-sentence descriptor is a glue guy who brings a winning intangibles to the floor with a well-rounded skill set. Let's hear from our locked-on UConn guy.
Tristan Newton from the two-time defending champion UConn Huskies. I'm Mark Zanetto from Locked On UConn. Tristan, a 6'5", 190-pound, big, versatile combo guard with smooth playmaking skills, excellent size for a lead guard, averaged 17 points, 6 assists, and 7 rebounds, leading UConn to back-to-back. Tristan's current comps in the NBA for me are Connecticut native Chris Dunn or Jalen Suggs. Both below the rim playmakers who you don't lose much, if anything, on defense when he becomes your backup lead guard. I believe if drafted by the right team, Tristan can be an impactful player as a rookie, leading a second unit for a playoff team. For more on Tristan Newton and all things UConn, follow and subscribe to Locked On UConn on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.
There you go, Tristan Newton, an interesting kind of guy that brings some intangibles. He's got an interesting story. He transferred over from East Carolina, won 2 national titles with UConn, and played a much bigger role in his second season, leader off the court, and the lead guard on the court. So this is the Jalen Brunson bet. You bet on a guy like this. All right, it worked for 2 national titles. And you can see where he can bring some stuff in the NBA. The size is 6'3", 6'4", so it's pretty good for a guard. The 3-point shooting is the thing that you're like, he flashed some ability, but 32% from 3 in his last year at UConn, 36% the year before that on only 3 attempts a game. So 3-point shooting really isn't there. It's hard in the NBA if you're like a lead guard where you go, all right, we're not really asking you to create offense. How does that even work? Well, could work with the Dallas Mavericks. You could play next to Luka. You could play in a secondary unit. So the strengths for him, though, on-ball defender, good finisher at the rim, 6.5 rebounds, 6 assists per game in college that second year at UConn. So that was great. 4 rebounds and 4 assists per game the first year at UConn. And this is a guy, if the Mavs wanted to bring in somebody that could could be that guy, the guard that comes off the bench. All right, we don't think that Jaden Hardy can be a guard, but or can be a lead guard. But we think Tristan Newton could be that guy, and that Hardy plays off of him. This is one's kind of interesting to me. He does have some athletic limitations, but we've seen guys like even Brunson in the past that doesn't really hold them back if you're able to be good in some of these other areas. Mavs Draft had him at 56. The Ringer had him at 57. The Athletic had him at 51, and then ESPN had him undrafted. So this is another guy that could get to the end and go, all right, I want to either go to the Mavericks at 58 or I want to get undrafted and go sign at the Mavericks. But I like this idea of a Tristan Newton. To me, I can see a much easier path for him to play than a Dylan Jones too. That different unorthodox type style where he's not that great of a defender. Where Tristan Newton comes in, he's like, all right, he could be a good defender and he could really help. Honestly, Tristan Newton sounds a lot like Bronny James, but like actually, but older. Obviously, he's 23, but older, and then was productive in college. But he, the frame, the like the skills, this like skill set it sounds like Bronny James. Which is kind of wild to me. But Tristan Newton, I'm definitely interested in. So there's 5 names. Let me know what you think about it. If you like any of those, if you think that those are the ones the Mavs should go with, this is all just draft stuff. So the Mavs are trading up, or if they're sticking at 58 and picking somebody, this is who I think they should go with. Guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me on the One More Thing Locked On Mavs.